So, welcome to our final week. You've moved through the stages of motivational interviewing with patience and curiosity over the last 7 modules. You've learned how change sounds in real time, how ambivalence shapes behavior, and how the spirit of motivational interviewing guides the entire process, and how small shifts in your language can open the door a little wider for the person sitting across from you. This last lecture turns towards the future. The readings from both Szalavitz and Miller and Rolnick offer a quiet invitation to step back, look at your growth, and imagine what comes next. Both texts end by focusing on endurance, responsibility, and the long view of helping work. They remind us that real change, whether inside one counseling session or inside an entire system, depends on sustained attention rather than quick fixes. This week is a good time for you to pause and notice your own movement. Maybe you listen differently than you did in week one. Maybe you reflect more. Maybe your tolerance for silence feels a little steadier. Maybe you have discovered the urge to fix clients is a habit that softens when you slow down enough to hear what they actually want. Miller and Rolnick emphasize that meaningful motivational interviewing practice develops through steady contact with your own learning. They describe motivational interviewing as a craft that grows session by session through many small experiments and honest self appraisal. Szalavitz pushed the same idea into a larger scale, pointing out that lasting change in public health requires people who stay committed even when progress feels slow, scattered, or fragile. Both authors show that the future of this work grows from people who can stay grounded when things get messy, honor autonomy even when fear gets loud, and keep curiosity alive. So stay in the work without burning themselves to ash. This week is about giving yourself permission to slow your pace and review what's shifted. Motivational interviewing grows in that kind of space, not in fireworks, but in the softer moments where self awareness sharpens and your purpose becomes a little clearer. So here's our readings this week. We've got chapters 20, 21, and 22 from Undoing Drugs, 16, 17, and 18 from the Miller and Rolnick text. And our agenda today is we're going to look at an overview of where we're headed in this final module, which is what we're doing right now. So you can just cross that off the list. We're going to talk about Szalavitz and how harm reduction movements grew over time and what this means for your work. We're also going to look at Miller and Rolnick and what it takes to keep learning motivational interviewing and how ongoing reflection strengthens your practice. And then we're going to do some discussion, and there will be prompts for you to pause and reflect on organizing for the future, lifelong MI learning habits, hope, challenge, and responsibility in addiction counseling. And I'm going to ask you to do a quiet check in with your own development and well being. And when I leave you, I just want you to acknowledge your work this term and set a goal for continued growth for yourself. So, Szalavitz spent these last chapters looking at what it takes to change the larger systems that shape addiction care. She described organizers, advocates, and harm reduction workers who kept going even when progress moved at a crawl. She showed how movements grow through small efforts that stack up over time. Many of the wins described came from people who were willing to sit with frustration, regroup, and try again. The theme running through these chapters is steadiness. Passion helps, but it cannot carry a movement on its own. Sustainable change requires structure, patience, and shared responsibility. She wrote about leaders who learned how to stay connected to their values while also navigating political pressure, public fear, and cultural resistance. She often highlighted how harm reduction grew because people created safer spaces long before laws or policies caught up. This connects well with motivational interviewing. I asks you to work with people instead of pushing them. It asks you to notice what's already present rather than forcing a direction. It teaches you how to stay relational even when pressure builds. The same skills that help you sit with a client's ambivalence also help you slow down the pace of the systemic reform. When we look at the future of addiction care in this country, the qualities that matter most are the ones that you've been practicing this term. They include collaboration in place of control, curiosity in place of defensiveness, respect for each person's right to choose, and a steady hold on hope even when change feels far away. Szalavitz showed how harm reduction grew because people trusted the idea that supportive, humane care saves lives. That trust shaped each conversation, training, partnership, and policy effort, and that motivational interviewing lives in that same mindset. You can learn to trust that people move towards growth when you give them space, respect, and a sense of their own power. So, how might collaboration, evocation, and respect for autonomy guide the way that you support larger movements for change, maybe even in leadership positions? Think about your own setting. Think about one real barrier that you care about. Consider how motivational interviewing could shape how you talk about that barrier with colleagues, administrators, or even community members. And then moving on to chapters 16, 17, and 18 in the Miller and Rolnick text, these chapters really turn the focus inward. After spending weeks learning the structure and spirit of motivational interviewing, the authors asked important questions. How does somebody continue to grow once the course ends? Their answer was steady and realistic. motivational interviewing does not settle in after one semester. It goes through patience, self awareness, and honest reflection. The text described motivational interviewing as a skill that becomes stronger when you stay close to your real sessions. You start noticing how your rhythm shifts between clients. You can recognize your patterns. You can feel your mind reach towards fixing. You notice when you feel silence that didn't need filling. You also recognize the sessions where you felt grounded and present. These moments show you where you are actually growing, and they also show you where you need attention. Miller and Rolnick encouraged helpers to study their conversations the way musicians study their practice sessions. They suggested recording your work when possible and listening back with curiosity instead of judgment. And once you hear your own voice outside of the moment, you begin to identify what supports change and what gets in the way. They pointed out that small details matter: a reflection that captures something important, a question that opens new direction, a moment where you protect a client's autonomy instead of taking over. They also talked about the writing reflex with clarity. The urge to fix people does not disappear just because you understand MI on paper. It shows up when you feel pressure, fear, or uncertainty. Learning motivational interviewing means learning to notice this urge and choosing a different response. Mastery is not about eliminating the reflex, it's about recognizing it sooner. Chapter 16 also introduced a helpful self rating checklist. It includes basic MI skills such as balancing reflections and questions, choosing complex reflections, noticing discord, and staying focused. Many practitioners are using this checklist throughout their careers. It helps you to see trends, catch blind spots, and track your growth with more accuracy. And Chapter 18 emphasized that motivational interviewing has been studied for decades. The research base is large, and motivational interviewing has shown effectiveness across many settings. This reminds you that the time that you put into learning MI is well spent. You're investing in an approach that is supported by strong evidence. So here are a few habits that Miller and Rolnick recommended as you continue developing your skills. Record your work when possible and listen back with curiosity. Notice how often you shift into teaching or correcting. Track the balance between reflections and questions. Stay connected to peers who give clear and honest feedback. Create a study plan that you can maintain. Return to individual chapters or skills one at a time instead of trying to master everything at once. And use the self-rating checklist as a regular tool for reflection. These habits fit within any counseling theory that you lean into. Some of you naturally blend with MI or with person-centered work because both approaches value empathy. Others bring MI into Gestalt because both encourage awareness without pressure. Some blend MI with CBT or trauma-informed practices or even recovery-oriented frameworks like 12-step facilitation. MI works alongside these models because it strengthens your ability to collaborate and listen. One message from these chapters stands out: your development as a counselor does not stop. This might sound heavy at first, but the authors frame it with hope. You are not aiming for perfection. You are aiming to stay awake in your own growth, stay curious, and treat yourself with the same compassion that you offer to the people that you serve. What practices will you keep developing after this course ends? What will help you stay curious and grow? Think about your own counseling conversations so far. What helped you feel steady and present? So both texts end by looking ahead. Szalavitz examined a national landscape marked by punishment, stigma, and fear, yet she showed how local communities continue to build humane, evidence-based systems in spite of these conditions. She brought attention to organizers who keep showing up when the policy environment feels harsh. Their persistence is a reminder that hope grows out of steady, repeated action. Miller and Rolnick offered a different angle on the future. Instead of focusing on policy or public attributes, they turned toward the individual counselor. They described how motivational interviewing practitioners sharpen their skills over time and become more intentional in their work. They reminded readers that becoming effective in MI is not about being perfect. It's about growing your capacity to listen, guide, and honor autonomy. Both perspectives point to a future that depends on helpers who stay connected to their values. Szalavitz pointed that these challenges are happening at a national scale. Miller and Rolnick pointed to the challenges that you meet in the room. Together, they suggest the future of addiction care is shaped by people who can hold the responsibility at the same time. So just take a moment to consider what that might look for you. It might show up in subtle ways. Some people feel hopeful when a client begins to speak with more confidence. Others feel hopeful when they see a community take a small step towards harm reduction. Some feel hopeful when they see a simple MI reflection land at the right moment and shift the tone of the session. Responsibility is more personal. Some counselors commit to learning how to protect their own energy so they can stay in the work for longer. Some commit to sharpening their skills and staying connected to current research. And some feel called to advocacy. Others focus on the quality of presence that they're bringing to each session. There's no single path. The important part is noticing what feels meaningful to you and letting that guide help your next steps. So, what gives you hope about the future of addiction counseling? What challenges or roles feel important for you to take on as you build your career? As you look forward for your future practice, it helps to keep an eye on your own well being. This is not an afterthought, it is part of the work. Counseling takes steady emotional energy, and the signs that you're stretching too thin can be subtle at first. These signs don't look the same for everyone. Some people notice irritability, some feel physically drained, others realize that they're checking out mentally during sessions, some feel their boundaries slipping. Motivational interviewing can help you catch these shifts because it teaches you how to slow down, listen inward, and notice the small cues that sometimes get ignored. So here's some simple, actionable steps that support your well being as you grow. First, try building a personal check in routine. Commit to a quiet 2-minute check in before or after, or maybe both, during each workday and ask yourself, how am I feeling in my body? What's the pace of my thoughts? Do I feel clear or foggy? And what pulled my energy today? This gives you early warnings before the burnout settles in. You can also track your patterns over time. Choose one signal that you want to watch out for. It could be something like tension in your shoulders, or feeling impatient frequently, or maybe losing interest in things that usually matter to you, or maybe even overworking or staying late too often. Write it down when it shows up. Patterns often reveal themselves within a couple weeks. And you can also create some boundaries that are going to protect your energy. So pick one boundary that you want to try to strengthen. So, for example, you could stop checking work emails after a set time, or take a real break between sessions, say no when your plate is full, or ask for supervision earlier rather than later. Small boundaries can really make a big difference in your stamina. You can also look at using motivational interviewing with yourself. Treat your own ambivalence with the same care that you offer clients. Ask yourself questions like, what part of me wants rest? What part of me feels pressure to keep going? What support would help me show up more fully? This helps you stay compassionate towards your own needs. And you also want to stay connected to supervision and peers. Isolation increases burnout. So here's a couple simple goals. Meet with one peer monthly to debrief on cases, or bring at least one challenging moment to supervision each week. You can also attend trainings or webinars at least once a quarter. And the last tip I have for you is to reconnect with meaning regularly. Every few weeks, ask yourself, what moments gave me energy? When did I feel useful or present? And what reminds me of why I choose this work? Writing those moments down can help you protect your sense of purpose when the work gets really heavy. When you're steady and rested, motivational interviewing flows more naturally. Your reflections come with more ease, you stay curious instead of pressured, and you can hold space for clients without drowning in their stories. That steadiness is not luck. It comes from caring for yourself with the same intention that you bring to your sessions. Your well being is not separate from your effectiveness, it is one of the strongest tools that you have. You've shown up each week with curiosity and commitment. You learned a counseling approach that often feels really uncomfortable at first. You practice skills that ask you to trust silence, give up control, and listen in a new way. You also allowed yourself to be reflective, honest, and sometimes vulnerable. That learning takes courage. And I want to name that effort and thank you for the work that you put into this class. Throughout the course, you stretched your understanding of what it means to support people through change. You listened to stories of harm reduction, advocacy, and long term systems work. And you practice motivational interviewing skills that require patience and presence. You studied your own habits and patterns, you paid attention to your instincts, and you learned to honor autonomy even when urgency showed up in the room. These are not small things, they mark real professional growth. So, as we close, take a moment to set one clear goal for your continued development. Keep it simple and realistic. Pick something that supports steady growth without adding pressure. Few possibilities include what I talked about in the self care portion, but it could also be something like reading an article on motivational interviewing during your lunch break, or listening back to one recorded session each month, practicing reflections with a colleague each week, or exploring how MI blends with a theory that you already enjoy. So choose one, make it your own. MI grows through repeated contact with real conversations, honest self reflection, and a willingness to keep learning. You already have everything that you need to take the next step. As you move forward in your training and your work, remember that the heart of motivational interviewing is relational. It grows in the moments where you show your pace, trust the process, and listen with genuine care. You've demonstrated that capacity again and again this term. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the attention, the effort, and the presence that you've brought to the course. And thank you for showing up for yourselves and for the people that you'll one day serve. I am so proud of your progress, and I am so grateful for the time that we spent learning together. You did really good work here.